Good evening, I'm Robin Shepherd-Capurro. Now, who doesn't love a sporting milestone? It all started with a meeting in the recently built John Mackintosh Hall back in 1964. It was then that the Gibraltar Amateur Basketball Association was first formed. Today, 60 years on to the day, they are one of the biggest sporting associations on the Rock. Over the next half hour, we'll take a trip down memory lane with some of those who have been there since the start and map out the journey from then to now. Welcome to the Sports Locker. Welcome along, guys. Thanks for taking some time out. We're going to try and squeeze 60 years into half an hour, if that's possible. Stanley, I'll start with you. So 1964 was when GABBA was first formed, but let's just sort of rewind briefly before then. When was basketball even first played on the Rock?
Well, I remember playing when I was at grammar school, when I was in my early teens. A Christian brother there, a very tall Christian brother who must have been, I think, a basketball player himself, decided to start a club. And some of us attended the club and took to the game. So that's how I started basketball up at school. Later on, I continued playing when I did my conscription service at the Gibraltar Regiment. I played for the regiment, and I also played for the Army in a tri-service competition that we had here. We used, obviously, the facilities then that were available, which were service facilities, like the Garrison Gymnasium, and a little later on we had the RAF gym, a big gym that we had and we used then at the time. So I went to see the director of the John Mackintosh Hall, who was Colonel Hunt at the time, and I said, I would like to play basketball in this hall. He looked at me a bit suspiciously, obviously, because the hall had been built for the school that was built at the Mackintosh Hall at the time. But he didn't say no. He said, well, think about it, consider a plan, and then come back to me. Meanwhile, I had contacted the late Joe Lara, who it came to my notice that he was a keen basketball player. Not by his size, you wouldn't have realized, because he was a small man, but he was a very good ball handler.
Small in basketball terms, or genuinely small?
Well, generally as well, right. But certainly in basketball terms. But he was a very good ball handler and very keen as well. We got together and drafted a plan, and we sort of talked about a constitution at the time, and we went back to Colonel Hunt and presented him with what we had planned, and I think we must have convinced him that we were responsible people using the newly built gymnasium there, and he allowed us to use that for a certain amount of time. Little did we know at the time that when we announced this first meeting, and it was attended by a number of people, hundreds would join GABBA, as it became known, within the first 2 weeks of its existence. Perhaps the fact that we were watching Spanish television at the time in glorious black and white, and one of the things, the sports that they featured there was basketball, recently innovated by American names such as, that I can remember, Loic and Brabander, and a few others that I forget now. And this sort of built up the enthusiasm as well. But it was amazing. At the time I was courting my would-be wife. She used to make the cards, whilst I, as the first General Secretary, was writing the minutes and preparing letters and so on to present to the committee.
Wow. Very different times. So it was on this day. I mean, tonight's episode could not be better timed. It was on this very day 60 years ago. Take us there, that famous first meeting in the newly built John Mackintosh Hall that Stanley refers to. So many of you there. You were a young teenager at the time.
Yes, 17. This is my recollection that this meeting was crazy. It was right. We're all ready to go. Bang, let's go. And then the registration process started, and there was nothing online then. Not that it would make much difference to me because I'm used as online, but everything was written, and I think poor Stanley had writer's cramp.
34 teams registered for that very first
right.
league, and then the women's league was swiftly introduced just a year later. I want to bring you two in. I don't want to do it too chronologically because we might be here until part 2. But just listening to these stories, I mean, it's inspirational stuff, no?
It truly is inspiring, especially starting from, as Stanley's mentioned, no, very little resources, from almost nothing, and having to plead and beg for anything that they threw their way. So it is quite inspirational to see that where we are right now, no, the history behind where we currently find ourselves.
And also, I mean, these days we're mad about health and safety, but you've told me before the sort of the nets were right up against the wall. I mean, things that just... Of course, I got myself. I want to pass these things.
John Mackintosh Hall, that's right.
I remember that distinctly, actually, because it wasn't a full-size gym.
You'd have to
and
start
the boards
slowing down.
were
You
far too near the wall.
You used to bang against the
My
wall.
buttocks were bruised every time I went up for a layup shot.
Nora, tell us about your introduction into the sport and your role in the committee. I know you're very modest, but you're going to have to sell yourself here. Come on.
Well, I started 1980s, 1970s. I trained with Chris Finch, and then we were playing at John Mackintosh Hall. Then after that, obviously, you know, we played different games, and I was selected for the national team, then became captain, then became coach, then became manager. That's my role of basketball. Before that, I was asked to be coach. I coach 9 to 10 years old, done up. Then we came up to mobile kids. And
this is what, 1970s?
1970s, 1980s. And then, obviously, we played as junior. We won the junior team. We went up to the top team. And, yes, the senior team. And we won the league. So by that end, obviously, they were old enough to go to uni. And I lost my team. But they were very good, very good. One of the best teams I've ever seen since they were little.
Adam, I've only ever known you...
Excuse me, and she's so modest that she's failed
she
failed to mention that among all this coaching and playing all that, she produced 2 of the best players Gibraltar's ever had.
Why didn't you mention that?
Well, we've got John for that.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Adam, I've only ever known you as national team men's head coach. What are your earliest memories of basketball?
My first years of basketball started in St. Joseph's Middle School in 1987, where I was approached at the time by, I'll never forget, one of the workers in the stadium, J.D. Tejas. I remember it. Back then, he approached me and said, "Do you want to play basketball?" Because at the time we had a team that was coached by Jackie Linares and Albert Tejas that coached that team.
Yeah.
So I started my basketball training in Humphreys. I did have the experience of playing in John Mackintosh Hall as well in my early days with mass computers.
Were you a multi-sportsman at the time?
Well, I was into my swimming up until 1993. I mean, that was a passion of mine, but I don't know, I think the whole, the league, the structure and everything else at the time, we had some very good competitive youth competitions there, and we had a lot of national team tournaments happening, so, you know, I kind of started to focus on basketball.
It's interesting that, because I was actually about to ask you what it was about basketball that hooked you, and I suppose the infrastructure and the solid work and the strong foundations built by by these over here that kind of like helped drag you in a little
we
bit
had
all
a
those
lot
years
of
later?
we had a lot of like draft competitions back then. We had a very similar format to we have now, like a draft where we used to have players drafted and we would be drafted into the different teams at a young age, which was something that would happen at the start of the season. We also had the teams from the UK that used to come over, the top American players that used to come over and play here. You know, we used to come down in the summer and watch them. We had the likes of Nigel Lloyd, Clive Allen, Ross Saunders, many top players, Tony Balogan. Had a lot of these players that came over to Gibraltar to play, and that definitely hooked us when we were younger.
I've missed a crucial step in the timeline, so I'm sorry, I'm going to rewind a second. The closed border years, 1969, the gates of the Gibraltarian Spanish border slammed shut. What impact does that have, by your memory, on basketball? I mean, on sports in general, but basketball specifically.
My memory is that when the border closed, we were still playing at Hargraves, which was the Macintosh Hall for competitive games ceased to exist, as it were, in 1967. So we played there for 3 years. Then the Department of Education made Hargreaves available to us, and it was started up, and we played there. But then the Rotary Club gave us the use of Landport, and the Royal Engineers helped us, and the Royal Engineers' professional help and a lot of sweat from our committee and members, Landport was built, was constructed as a basketball court. By the time we started in 70, the border was closed. And then basketball took a further surge in popularity, especially at weekends. Now, basketball is played at weekends in the mornings now, but then the top games at Landport were during the Frontier close time on Sunday mornings. That was the match, the match of the week, as
Everyone's sort of gearing up for that Sunday morning.
So
that's right.
that is my vivid recollection. Other than that, the police took advantage of that and booked everybody for parking on the pavement. But because the police were playing members as well, we managed to sort that out.
I mean, I speak to hockey players, I speak to swimmers, to runners, to football players, and what those closed border years, as unfortunate as they were politically, from a sporting point of view, they really sort of focused minds, didn't they?
Yeah.
That's right.
Fantastic. We were hemmed in, of course. We didn't have the comfort we have nowadays that we can go and play anywhere in Spain. And we are lucky in basketball. We are lucky that we're next door to one of Europe's top, if not the top basketball nation. And it's open. There are other sports that don't have that. We are lucky, and Adam can talk to you much more about that because he's much more in contact with that side, which is very recent.
We will hold that thought. We'll take a very quick break. You're watching the Sports Locker, and we're talking 60 years of the Gibraltar Amateur Basketball Association. Do not go away. Welcome back to the Sports Locker. We're talking 60 years of the Gibraltar Amateur Basketball Association. Just before we ended part one, we were talking a bit about the closed border years and how it sort of focused minds from a sporting point of view anyway. And you spoke about how you guys used to build up for that huge Sunday, the fixtures that came on Sunday. So tell us about, because we were just speaking during the break, welcoming the England under-23 squad to Landport.
England under-23, coached by Maurice Wordsworth, who was the coach of Doncaster Panthers at the time. He was a good friend of mine. I met him in England, and he said, "I'll take the under-23s over before a tournament we have to see." And he was a bit upset because they expected to win, and they didn't.
So who was there? Who was competing?
It was Fous Rabat, who were champions of Morocco. Link with Morocco was a Banque Populaire, a Moroccan bank that existed here in College Lane. And the British Army UK, they brought their team. And that's 4 of us. And the England under-23 finished third. The final was between us and this Moroccan team.
Fair to say it got a little heated.
It got very heated. The Moroccan community at the time, the supporters, didn't agree with some refereing decisions, and I won't go into that in any detail.
Who was
But
referee?
I don't remember. I think it was her husband. I think.
I can't really remember, but yes.
No.
You don't
There
recall?
again,
No. The referee was a guy who came with the England team, Malcolm Heath. He was a top referee,
right.
and I think it was Douglas Ressa.
Was he?
I think it was Douglas Ressa.
Right, okay.
How crystal clear are your memories of those huge Sunday clashes?
There were the two, sorry?
The big Sunday clashes, such as.
Well, that was well past my time. I left after 3 years. I was only there for 3 years as a committee member. But what I remember distinctly was how quickly we started playing at other places. I mean, we started off at the Macintosh Hall officially as GABBA, and then we moved to Hargraves. Then I remember, because I lived in police barracks, I remember helping the police marking a court there in what now is the Archers. There was a big playground there. So I remember playing there, and specifically I remember playing for the police when they invited the American Navy coming in to play there with them. And that's something which was totally unforgettable, because the American team, they were constantly commenting and talking throughout the game all the time. And that was quite an experience.
Nothing's changed, no?
Nothing has changed.
Nothing's
Trash
changed.
talking. huh?
What
Coming
about
back-
Gibraltar? Sorry.
Coming back to Lamport, we used to take our packed lunch. Remember, John?
Stay the whole day.
So stay the whole day there, you know? And luckily, our daughters loved basketball. So, I mean, Albert, myself, and the kids, we were watching.
All involved.
All involved. And
What would the
at
English
Lamport.
under-23 squad say today if you were to invite them back to Lamport for a reunion?
Concrete ground.
Concrete ground.
To Landport. What would our guys say playing at you?
Ask my
Imagine that.
knees.
What about the first ever international that Gibraltar took part in? Our first ever international tournament.
Unofficially,
Yeah.
unofficially, before we were in FIBA or anything like that. I think that's more stands than me, but I think you went across to Algeciras.
And we went across to Algeciras, and that was an experience, again, not to be
It
forgotten.
was early days, very, very early days.
It was a very badly lit court out in the open somewhere. We were very green, obviously. We had just started playing. So to play competitively against Morocco and a team from Spain, which must have come from Algeciras, for the first time ever, when I went up for a layup shot, they held onto my shorts and pulled me down. I had never experienced that in the game at all
dark
before.
arts.
You know. And that's probably my first recollection of going out of Gib to play. Not to be repeated, not like that.
We're having to sort of skim through the timeline. 2005, the Tercentenary Hall opens, and that is a multi-sport hall, but a new home for GABBA.
Yep, that was, I think, the opening of the Tercentenary. We invited the Globetrotters at the
I
time.
was there
yes,
with my
I
dad.
know.
I forget.
That was an important year in basketball, because then from there we started to have some of our Gibraltar national teams participating in the Cadiz League.
Right.
You know, this was something that John pushed, you know, for local basketball, and it was great, the experience of having our teams playing throughout the whole of Cadiz. And we've actually now gone back, and we've introduced our teams into the Cadiz League again this year under Damex, under there.
Monica, tell us about the women's game here in Gibraltar. I suppose popularity, whether it's men or women, in certain sports sort of ebbs and flows. It seems as though women's basketball, girls' basketball, is in a really good space right now.
With girls' basketball, as you've mentioned, it has its generations where they become really popular, then we lose some of them. But currently, we are working very, very hard to try to bring the sport back. I suppose in Gibraltar we're in a very unique position where in such a small community the girls that we have playing basketball play other sports as well.
Yes.
So whereas we do encourage, obviously, multi-sports athletes to come and compete with us, we are still competing with a very small number of girls. But we are working super hard to try and get those numbers up, and we have been doing so quite successfully over the last few years.
Tell us about Her World, Her Rules, a global initiative.
Yes.
which
Doing
recently
very
came
well.
to-
They're doing well.
you.
I've got to say that.
It seems like it from the outside.
They are. They are.
It does.
Her World, Her Rules locally started about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And its aims is to introduce new girls to the sport in a very sort of comfortable environment where they don't feel too intimidated by the nature of the sport. We're now in its third year. And currently we have our school liaisons officers reaching out to different local schools, primary and secondary, upper primary and secondary, and trying to recruit as many young girls to the sport as possible. I think recently Jason McMahon, one of our school liaisons officers, ran one of these events in a local school, and I think he
His
invited about
enthusiasm-
70.
his
Oh, yes.
enthusiasm is
Infective.
addictive, huh? Oof.
Infective, difficult to keep up with, because, you know, he has a lot of that energy,
It's
but it is
brilliant, though.
infective, which
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah, we
amazing.
need more of it.
I mean, testament to him, the fact that he but he had about 70-odd girls come to one of his events, which was amazing to see. Seeing so many girls and the level of enthusiasm is really a testament to the work that he's doing.
Do the Globetrotters still trot the globe? Is that
Yes.
like that?
Yes, they are, actually. There was last year
They're
and
not
this
as
year they
popular
have
now as...
No?
No, because I think it's more spectacular to see the NBA players now and the things that some of the skills that they perform.
But you could have argued that was the case
No,
15, 20
some
no?
of the Stephen Currys now shooting.
They're sort of
they're
doing Globetrotter-style stuff.
You wait for the Paris Olympics.
Yeah?
The dream team of
Yeah.
1992
Yeah.
would disappear.
But-
The team they're taking to the Olympics, it's indecent, honestly.
Quick question. Who was Richie Buchanan?
Richie Buchanan was an American sailor. The American Navy had an office here in Gibraltar in those days. And this guy turned up in Gibraltar and he announced himself and he wanted to play basketball. So he was playing, first of all, for a team in the dockyard called Falcons. And I coached Blue Stars, and we had a fabulous Moroccan player, Abdel Haznawi, but a very conflicted guy. He wanted money. We didn't pay anybody. But then the word went round that the guy from the dockyard team offered him money. So he said, I'm going to join this team. He said, you can't do that just like that. So I negotiated a switch. I got the Buchanan, and this guy went to Falcons.
And how many years ago was this?
1960...
And now it's...
Late 68. But this guy was here for 2 years, and then he was taken off to Vietnam. But before that, he took a Gibraltarian girl and married her and took her back to America. She still comes now and again, and when she comes, we get together. Violet Buchanan, Violet Scambries, actually. And he never came back to Gibraltar, but he had such a wonderful time here that he presented a series of trophies. And
The Richie Buchanan Trophy.
He's become a legend. He died, unfortunately, he died 2 years ago.
We've got to go very quickly, but just briefly, Adam, just before we do go, a very busy summer ahead.
very busy summer ahead. We've just come from obviously having many of our youth teams in the Cadiz League. We've got our international competitions coming up. We've got our under-16 girls are going to be playing in Gibraltar. Our under-18s and under-16 boys travel to Albania and Azerbaijan. Then we've got a senior men's tournament taking place in Andorra. Yeah, and obviously it's been a very busy year, I must say. And obviously going back to, I think what Nora was saying about one of the best girls team that we've had. We've presently got a very good group of under-12 girls that are playing in the Guys League in the top division, the A division. Yep. And it's their first experience. Their first years are going to be there to return next year. And
High hopes for them then.
High hopes for them there, for sure. There's a lot of potential there.
Good stuff. Okay, so in keeping with tradition, 10 quick-fire questions. Adam, you've been on a few times and you've not had the chance to answer them, so now this is your chance on the 60th anniversary of GABBA. Here we go. So one meal to eat for the rest of your life.
Lasagna.
Same. Favorite TV show?
Friends.
Favorite beach in Gibraltar?
Catalan Bay.
Best local basketball player of all time? Can't say yourself.
I'd have to say for probably Aaron Turner for me.
Okay. One rule change you would make in basketball?
Extend the three-point line.
Becoming too easy these days, you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Describe John in 3 words.
Difficult.
Top guy.
That's 2.
Passionate about basketball.
Love it. Master every instrument or learn every language.
Learn every language.
Pineapple on pizza.
Yes.
Podcasts or music.
Podcast.
Secret hobby.
Kite surfing.
Kite surfing, nice. And dinner with anyone dead or alive.
It has to be Kobe Bryant.
Nice. Like it. Guys, thanks for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Especially you, Nora. I know you're a little bit shy about coming on, so thank you. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
I'm afraid that's all we've got time, though, for this evening. It was on this very day, 60 years ago, that the Gibraltar Amateur Basketball Association was founded. What an incredible journey it's been since. Catch you same time next week on The Sports Locker. Good night.